to the Spirit Box podcast, exploring folklore, esoterica, and the mysteries of the spirit world. I'm your host, Dara, and I invite you to join me in this exploration, from the secrets of the jinn to the whispering of demons and everything in between. Joining us in the Spirit Box for episode 26 is Michael Lichens. Michael holds an MA in religion and literature from the University of Chicago and spent much of his time studying overlooked spiritual experiences when he isn't busy revising and editing. He is the editor of the Catholic Exchange and resides in Colorado, where you can often find him discussing preachers, ghosts, and churches of the Old West. Today we'll be discussing the book The Devil is Afraid of Me, the life and works of the world's most popular exorcist by angelologist Father Marcello Stanzione. The book narrates the true story of Father Gabriele Amorth, the former chief exorcist of the Vatican, who is reputed to have performed more than 60,000 exorcisms over a 30-year period in Rome. The book details some experiences that Father Amorth had during his career, like the windows icing over during an exorcism in summertime in Rome, dealing with the results of magical attacks and curses, and some startling manifestations, including a young man producing nails from his mouth while undergoing exorcism. We compare elements of the accounts and techniques detailed with the Islamic equivalent and look at the reasons why individuals can be vulnerable to obsession and possession. And we discuss the fate of fallen angels from both the Catholic and fairy lore perspectives, and some really interesting correlations. The book is published by Sophia Institute Press, and you can find a link to purchase the book in the show notes below if you want to find out more. And as always, there's an open invitation to you all to send me your experiences. I'll leave the links below, and you can either email me or message me on Instagram, as a lot of people do. And I want to hear about your experiences. Have you seen the Shadow Man? Have you had experience with the Jinn? Yeah, so share. We need to add to the body of knowledge. Anyway, if you like the show, my shameless pitch moment, if you like the show and want more Spirit Box in your life, join the Patreon and the podcast Discord and join the conversation. It's the price of a coffee or a reasonably priced alcoholic drink, and you get all the shows early and a host of other great perks. Okay, I think that's enough. Let's get into it. Hello, Michael. You're very welcome to the Spirit Box. I'm really happy to have you on board, and I'm looking forward to getting your perspective on the mysteries of the spirit world. So the book we're going to talk about today is The Devil is Afraid of Me. And for the listeners, could you give a quick synopsis about the title and its subject matter?
Absolutely. I think I'll start first with Father Amorth and his life. He is a very fascinating figure who wrote extensively and was interviewed quite a bit about his work as an exorcist, a thing he did literally until the day he died. Even in his elderly years, he'd meet with around 10 or 11 people a day who needed his help or advice on various things. And through all that, through his writing, his willingness to work with a lot of people and do some things that were unusual for an exorcist, like using a telephone to try to perform an exorcism.
Wow.
He became kind of a celebrity figure among Catholics, especially those of us who are interested in exorcisms and the history of what this job and, well, not job, it's vocation really entails. And that's what we try to collect here is in The Devil is Afraid of Me. It's a collection of interviews and writings from Father Amorth that haven't been translated into English until now. And through that, we're trying to give a full view that goes into a lot of what Father Amorth did, including his very first exorcism.
Fantastic. And where exactly is he from? So he's Italian, right?
Yes, he's from Italy. In fact, he was in his teen years, I think this is very much in line with his vocation as an exorcist. He joined the partisans to fight against Mussolini's and the Nazi government placed in Italy.
Good man.
Hmm.
Um, so he's been fighting the good fight
Yeah.
for the era.
Yeah.
Awesome. So in terms of I guess having spent his life doing exorcisms and a remarkable number of them, what 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 would he describe a demon is? You know, what would he describe the characteristics of a demon? The what makes them up?
First, yeah, first and foremost, they lie. The devil in Catholic theology, and most Christians share this, they call the devil the prince of lies. So this is a being that does not want to embody or be part of the truth, but can be deceiving all the same because, again, it lies. In fact, one of Father Amorth's experiences was that the demon promised to leave the person that was being exorcised, did not do so at all. And when Father was questioning the demon, he said, "Well, I'm a demon. I lie. This is what I do." And so that's the big one.
Yeah.
And then there's, of course, the what you would call the supernatural or the strange things that can happen around demons.
Mhm.
He describes like physical characteristics like a sense of dread. You'll see ice forming on the windows and things
Wow.
of that nature. His only criticism when he saw William Friedkin's amazing film The Exorcist is he thought it was a little too dramatic, but pretty close to what he did.
Incredible. I mean, just thinking about the Exorcist film, I mean,
Hmm.
there must be something about the person's characteristic to have that vocation that is
Yeah.
remarkably courageous and I mean, I don't think anybody can be fearless, but I guess there's a level of fear that you just don't
Hmm.
have or don't react to carry out such a role. Um,
Yeah.
and in the book, he describes the book describes some of the exorcisms. Can you take us through some of the more kind of I guess the more, well, I suppose, dramatic ones that spring to mind?
Excuse me. I've mentioned his first exorcism, which was a particularly interesting one. And when I say first exorcism, that's after he was done being the protege of another famous exorcist, Father Candido Amonti. And so when he finally had his first solo exorcism, the thing got weird right away because the young man who needed his help would often speak English when the devil was embracing him
Wow.
or calling out. So Father Amorth needed a translator, which he never had before.
Right.
And through this, almost immediately, like he begins the exorcism in the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. The temperatures drop, the room gets a little dark. And this was, I believe, in July. So it was unusual when he saw that ice was forming on the windows little by little. And he continues the exorcism. He gets a lot of screams, a lot of like attempts to jump at him, punch him. And then he finally gets to the point in the Roman rite of exorcism where he says, Preciopo tibi, I command you. And at this point, he's able to ask the demon under the threat of Christ coming and the holy water to talk, and this demon will say its name. But in this case, the demon only said one word, Lucifer. And Father did not need any translator to know what this meant.
Sure.
And I believe that young man took a lot of sessions, and it wasn't the last time that a spirit identifying itself as Lucifer would taunt or call out to Father Amorth.
Right. And I mean, you're straight in there with the big leagues, I guess. You know,
Hmm.
that must be pretty intimidating. And in terms of other things that happened in exorcisms, I mean, did he see people perform, say, kind of remarkable feats of strength or
Hmm.
levitations, that kind of thing?
He often does talk about weird physical happenings that can occur. Some of them you might be able to explain, like the strength, and he has seen that before where people literally can like take on three people even though they're a young teenager
Hmm.
and try to attack Father Amorth. He also found one of the weirdest cases I read about was he always had a handkerchief in case he got sped at.
Hmm.
So it's a weird thing that he got very good at, strangely, that he talks about within this book, that he got very good at using a handkerchief and keeping spit from landing on his face. But one time it was nails that just manifested out of this young man's mouth,
Wow.
and he literally spat the nails at Father Amorth. He kept those nails in his workshop until the day he died.
Mm. That's incredible.
Hmm.
Um, and in the book, it describes his exorcism room.
Yes.
Can you take us through that?
Yeah. So this was chronicled by an American journalist, Tracy Wilkinson, which she wrote the book that inspired the Rite. But she describes Father
Okay.
Amorth's room. It's very small. It's far away from the streets because he doesn't want anybody to hear the screaming. And which, by the way, is one of the weirdest things I ever had to read. It's like, oh yeah, I guess you would have to make sure it's off the street, because if people hear screaming all day, they're going to ask questions.
Sure.
And it was a very sparse room. It's 9 by 15 feet, sea green. If anybody lived in Rome and you lived in a house that was built in the 70s, you know exactly what this thing looks like. Vinyl floors and all that.
Hmm.
And he always kept a briefcase, whether he was in his office or having to go meet someone, that included 2 wooden crucifixes, a holy water sprinkler, holy oil, and as well as his purple stole.
And the use of holy water, what is that
Mm.
used for in an exorcism?
Holy water is used for a lot of things in Catholicism. And among the things we believe it can do is that it can take hold of demons and turn them away. So in an exorcism, the holy water is there to act as, in some cases, Father Amorth would use holy water to see if the person was reacting, to see
Hmm.
if they actually needed an exorcism or maybe just needed to see a psychologist or a doctor. He would use holy water to see how they'd react. And sometimes uh, whatever was going on would not react at all until maybe the third or fourth sprinkling and the prayer and the blessing. But often, when he sprinkled holy water on a person, they reacted almost as if you were throwing acid at them.
Right.
And that was usually a good sign that, okay, this person might actually need an exorcism.
The reason I ask, I was brought up Catholic, so
Yes.
I'm fairly aware of the potency of holy water and
Mm-hmm.
kind of what it represents. But one of the interesting things I found out in my research, and but within Islam and the use of ruqya, which is a type of sanctioned healing to combat sihir, which is
Mm-hmm.
negative sorcery. It's stuff that people would cast, spells, curses, that kind of stuff on a target. But also to exercise jinn is there's the use of Quranic water,
Oh.
which is an Islamic equivalent. It's very much the same tool, but that would also include kind of bathing in Quranic water, or adding kind of a bottle of Quranic water to a bath for the person to kind of be cleansed as well, as part of some of the rituals. But it's very, very similar.
Fascinating.
Yeah, really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
in one of the questions I have as well here is, what are the 4 methods a demon uses to enter souls?
Uh, yeah, that's one. That's definitely one of the fun ones that Father Amorth talks about. But it can enter your soul through. There's things that are fairly common now in our world, and there's things that are very rare. A full-on possession, wherein the demon can take control of the body, can really hurt people. That's one of the way. That's in a very extreme case, but
Mhm.
it is one of the ways. But among the ways that Father Morth noted in his work was, the first one would be if someone casted a spell at you.
Mhm.
Father notes that most of these spellcasters, Italy has an interesting culture when it comes to folk magic, psychics. A lot of Romani people will sometimes sell their particular use of magic to Italians. Father Moore thought most of them were not necessarily effective, or they were could be just charlatans, but occasionally you get someone who wants to cast an evil spell on someone who will accept payment for that. In one case, it was, Father Amorth noted, it was a young girl about in her early 20s who was being vexed by, excuse me, being vexed by a spirit. And through the exorcism, Father Amorth learned that this demon came about because of a spell that this girl's mother-in-law put on her because she didn't approve of their marriage.
Wow.
And other ways can be direct if you're doing particular occult rituals and you want to open that door to invite something otherworldly and pure evil.
Mm-hmm.
That is a thing that can happen. I know of one case in my personal life. A young man told me that he was trying to do a ritual to summon Lucifer as a joke, and then a bunch of things went wrong in his life, and all I could think was, don't open that door. You don't know what you're playing with. Just leave it alone. And that was a little rare in Father Moore's case, but some other things could be temptations to renounce God, and especially to commit an irreversible sin, such as Judas Iscariot, or things like that, where you literally just give up on all hope of mercy, of love, and of any communication with God.
It's really interesting to hear you say about, you know, somebody attempting a ritual that they they consider a joke. They're not taken seriously. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because basically magicians would say the exact same thing. You know, they would say exactly the same thing. You know, you do not engage with stuff that frankly is above your pay grade. You know, within the practice of magic, it takes a huge amount of practice and discipline and understanding and study to even get to anywhere near where you'd want to be kind of engaging in those kind of rituals. And obviously being very select about, you know, who and what you're trying to dial up for what reasons. But interestingly enough, from the Islamic perspective, the reasons why someone would come under jinn attack would be very similar, but there's also kind of the element of kind of multi-generational attacks due to, say, the death of an ancestor. So an ancestor may engage in sorcery of some description for something off a jinn and kind of promise generational their great grandchildren or so on as in exchange for whatever they want, which is a terrible, awful thing to do. The other side of it is somebody doesn't hold up the bargain, and the time is different in the spirit world, so the payback goes down through the generations. You know, that's
interesting.
That's something that can happen.
Have you ever been to Prague, perchance?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, did you happen to go by the Faust House?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. It's it's now part of Charles University's medical building. It was nicknamed that because it was said to have been a place of several different occult rituals, and it was thought to be cursed. It's a beautiful Baroque building, I think from the late 1600s.
Oh, wow.
And I'll tell you, going inside as a fan of literature and folk tales, going inside and just looking around the courtyard, you can feel that.
It's got the vibe. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Prague has a massive history of that, like a huge alchemical history. You know, I mean, John Dee and Edward Kelly were based in Prague for a while. So, you know, it was that kind of the center of occult and magical practice and alchemy for a long time. With one of the things that I kind of also found interesting, and I'm really delighted to have you on the show to be able to talk about this, is I think about 2 years ago I did a video on kind of trying to put side by side the ideas of obsession and the Islamic equivalent was. Now, what was is basically defined as kind of the whispering of devils, and basically the symptoms of was are very much like for like as for obsession. They're almost kind of interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, you can see how they can be really easily conflated with genuine mental illness. And as an exorcist, that must be a great concern, where someone is presented as exhibiting the symptoms of obsession, not naturally, or even a full-on possession. How does an exorcist go about ascertaining that this is a spiritual issue and not a mental health one?
Almost always, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing and talking to exorcists who would talk to me off the record, as well as psychologists, actually, and psychiatrists who often are consulted about exorcisms. And that's very common practice, I want to say, throughout the Catholic world, at least, is that preferably a psychiatrist, but oftentimes also a psychologist and even a medical doctor will be consulted to try to see if the person is truly in need of an exorcism, or as Father Amorth would put it, they need healing, but not necessarily the healing of an exorcism.
Mm-hmm.
They need a doctor and they need some help, therapy to get through this. And either way, that's a good thing if we can lead them to the right place. But
100%.
yeah, but often doctors are there to verify, okay, there's nothing within medicine that can explain either, what's going on with them in terms of changes, strength, or nightmares or anything like that.
Well, that was my second question, is like, well, what are the indicators that it is a spiritual issue?
Often a good indicator is, of course, we were talking about obsession, and that's a particular way that demons can manifest, is when you're being assailed by just uncontrollable thoughts and you want to do it. It can look like OCD or things like that. Where Father would say the difference is, and why psychologists need to be consulted, is if they have any reaction to religious symbols, to holy water or anything like that, if they're even afraid of Father Amorth. And also he can observe if there's supernatural occurrences.
Mm-hmm.
He and but in all cases he often has a doctor consult and tell him whether or not there's anything to go about it. If they can find a natural issue, like, oh yes, this person has a history of this condition which might cause them to see things that aren't there, then they go to the doctor. And as Father Amorth said, he never wants to diagnose people medically.
Yeah. The title of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite a distinct and powerful phrase. What's the story behind that?
So that was it's a bit of a play on an incident that happened with Father Amorth. One, his personal motto was always that the devil is nothing against the mercy of God. But in one incident, when he was performing an exorcism, the demon understood who Father Amorth was and was able to even talk to him. And this devil said, "We can do nothing against you because you are too protected." And and also he found that they were even afraid of him. Some of the demons who had encountered him before knew of him, but he knew in those moments that not only did the underworld, the demons, understand who he is and what he is, they were actually afraid of him. And that gave him a little bit more of an idea of what his vocation was after that incident where the demon said, "We can't do anything, you're too protected."
That's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the things that the demons say, so I mean, when we started this interview, I mean, we position them as lying. They're the prince of lies, etc.
Mm-hmm.
How was he able to ascertain what he's being told is the truth, or did he ever kind of Did he ever kind of give it the? I guess. Did he ever feel he was being told the truth? Did he have kind of an internal indicator of some description?
He had some of a gift of what we call in the Catholic Church discernment. Uh, However, he notes that his mentors and friends, particularly Father Candido, had the ability to read souls in a mystical way,
Right.
understand a person almost immediately. This made them very good confessors. In the case of Padre Pio, it was a similar gift. Father Amorth didn't possess that, according to him, but eventually he just developed an instinct that kind of comes with any vocation.
Mm.
You do it enough times, you know the signs you're looking for. You look for uh, things that cannot be explained by nature, and that can include anything from changes in the temperature suddenly or anything like that. And eventually he can get a good feel for what's going on with the person and what they'll do. But as I said, he got tricked a couple times where a demon lied and would assure him he was leaving or something like that. And Father Amorth had to learn a couple times, okay, don't trust them until they're gone. Just they're not going to tell you the truth.
Mm. And with demons, like where do they come from? Like, what is the Catholic view of where do demons come from? Like, what are they?
Demons, according to Catholic theology, are the angels who rebelled against God in heaven and were cast down by Saint Michael into the earth. And that was roughly 1/3 of all of God's angels. I
Wow.
don't have an exact number off the top of my head, but it was many. And so they are angels. They can even sometimes appear like the angels you would expect and want to see, yeah, or depending on which angels you're talking about. There's, of course, terrifying angels throughout the Old Testament, but uh, so they can even appear and look like angels. And for that, that means they're not physical beings. They're not bound by time and space. They exist still in eternity, but they're cast away from heaven.
And to that point, what do they want from possession?
They want our souls. They want, according to Father Amorth, their entire being is to basically destroy us spiritually, to make us doubt, to make us turn away from God. That is their entire being. Is almost this. I call it almost an unnatural hatred of us.
Right,
And Father Morth notes that as well, is that it's almost their being to hate us.
right. Yeah, it's really interesting
Mm-hmm.
to look at it from that perspective. So within within kind of the, I mean, fairies have the same background in terms
Mm-hmm.
of origin. So they're believed, I mean, certainly kind of in Western European folklore, that
Mm-hmm.
they're fallen angels. And again, with Islam is kind of close to it. That there's a little bit of uh, there's some theological back and forth on whether this is the case or not, whether jinn are angels, because there are three distinct races or beings that were created within the Islamic spiritual worldview, that being kind of jinn, who are made from the heat of the sun and wind, made from fire, angels, which are made from light, and human beings, which are made from sounding clay. And the issue again that kind of arose with the cosmic war
Mm-hmm.
is when Allah created man, he commanded the angels and the jinn to bow down to Adam,
Mm.
and Iblis, the head, Iblis was with the angels but not of them. So the idea was that he was a kind of an elevated jinn of some description, which had free will, where the angels don't have free will, and that's kind of where that schism happened, and the jinn have been taking their revenge on humanity ever since.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's very similar, and the
Mm-hmm.
bit that really kind of jumped out for me was when I'm looking at kind of the folklore behind fairy mythology, kind of coming back home, coming full circle after kind of my travels, and seeing that the same mythology exists within Western Europe, with fairies, exactly the same thing, fallen angels. And that an interesting thing in Irish folklore is there's no redemption for the fairies. There's no redemption for the fallen angels. They, when the judgment day comes, they're not going back to heaven. And is that the same for demons?
Can you say that last part again?
So the idea that so within Irish folklore,
Hmm.
there's lots of stories around
Yeah.
fairies trying to find out if there's any chance of forgiveness, if there's any chance of redemption, and
Hmm.
it comes back again and again. No, there isn't. And within from the Catholic perspective, is it the same for fallen angels?
It is indeed, because one of the strange things, if you were to read Thomas Aquinas or Augustine, when you look at the afterlife, when you look at the spiritual world, it's not bound by time and space, like I said, and thus all your decisions, you realize all the consequences of your decisions immediately, and they're permanent.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the demons, that's exactly the case. They made their choice, it was unfolded, and they were sent away from it. But because of their wills, which are not bound by time and space and exist in eternity, their wills are permanent and they cannot turn back. And I don't think, honestly, based off Father Amorth's readings in this book and a few previous ones, I think we could say that they would never want to anyways, because
Right, that's really interesting.
the pride just will not let them even think of that.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting afterthought. Um, changing tack somewhat.
Sure.
Um, what would be Father Amorth's tips, or what lessons would he give to people to protect themselves from intrusion and obsession and on up to possession?
There's a couple. First of all, we all have access to what are called sacramentals. These can be anything like your family rosary that's been blessed, the crucifix, things like that. If you're like me and you love to go to various holy sites, I have so many medals of different saints as well as holy water. Father Morth also recommended what he called prayers of liberation, which in the Catholic Church, only priests can be exorcists. But with these prayers of liberation, Father Amorth found that they were particularly powerful against demons. And they can be as simple as the St. Michael prayer that if you were raised Catholic, you probably know it forwards and backwards, no matter what. And or the Our Father, simple things like that. And then Father Amorth recommends various prayers pulling from ancient Christianity. Sometimes he'll use Eastern Orthodox scholars as well. And at the end of this book, we include a few of these. They're prayers that have been said throughout the ages against demons, and they're approved for the laity. So while you're not performing an exorcism, in many cases, this can be enough to keep the demons away from
Has Father Amorth ever had to kind of deal with ghosts? I mean, are they seen as a different thing? Um, and would they be treated differently, or is it just a totally different thing that wouldn't come his way?
you. So he had a few opinions. He didn't talk as extensively about ghosts as I would have liked, compared to
Mm-hmm.
some other great writers. But in his opinion, it's best not to immediately trust anyone that's identifying as a spirit, an ancestor, anything, especially if you're contacting them through either a Ouija board or some ritual.
Mm-hmm.
He often recommended don't trust. You can't trust them immediately. But he also found that people would. There's a famous exorcism case that happened in St. Louis where it started with a grieving boy trying to contact his aunt through an Ouija board, and it was in fact not his aunt who reached out, but pretended to be.
Mm-hmm.
And in other cases, he didn't have much of an opinion on whether or not the ghost could enter. We do have Catholic saints who did talk about this extensively, namely Thomas Aquinas, who recounted ghosts who would they either reveal themselves to ask for prayers or favors. It's not uncommon. Thomas Aquinas told the story of Pope Gregory the Great encountering a bathhouse ghost, a ghost who was a very helpful man who really just wanted to be prayed for. So when some mass was said, the ghost was never seen again.
Right.
If they're trying to offer you secret knowledge or anything like that, Father Amorth recommends just getting out of there.
Mm-hmm. I always find it amazing that people selectively use Ouija boards. I'm like, how much how much bad press does something have to get before people kind of go, yeah, maybe I should give this a miss?
Well, I mean, it's so deceiving because in many ways it's a game and you can pretend it's just a party game, but
Mm.
it's also like in some cases, it can act as a doorway as well. And it's so strange to me sometimes. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a few dead people I would love to hear from, but I'm always thinking, if they need to talk to me, I think they know how to reach me, and I don't want to play with this board.
Yeah. So looking back over all the different interviews and different
Mm-hmm.
stories around his life, what was the story that kind of really kind of just resonated with you, that stayed with you?
Oh, that's a good question. I mentioned the Lucifer one because I thought that was a fantastic story. Uh, but I think one of my favorites will always be the story. One of the stories that's often told of him is when he encountered. He would always like go the extra mile to try to reach people who needed exorcism, and he was their last hope. And this included trying to exorcise people via phone and things like that. He would often meet with people for many months as long as they needed him. In one case, it was a young man driven to his office by his mother who had been exhibiting unusual signs of strength. He would speak in many different voices, languages that no one understood, all the classic signs of a possible possession. Well, his mother comes into Father Amorth's office and says, "I'm sorry, he refuses to get out of the car. I don't know what to do." And this is important to know, but for exorcisms, the person being exorcised ultimately has to agree to consent to it. Their will has to be in line with the exorcism.
Right.
Otherwise, priests won't perform it because it just won't work. So Father Amorth goes to the car seeing if it's maybe just social anxiety, or maybe this young man doesn't in fact want an exorcism, and he has to just say, "Okay, well, good luck." And but when he got to the car, he talked to the young man through a rolled down window, and after a few minutes, he found the demon was literally pressing him down against the seat. He couldn't even lift his arms, so he physically was not able to get up. And Father Morth, realizing that this is one of those signs, he put on his stole and climbed into the back seat of this car and performed a simple rite of exorcism right there in the back seat of an Italian vehicle.
Wow.
And I love that story because it shows the dedication he really had, and that's something you get from reading all his stories. Is he's a tenacious man. In fact, that's probably the best word to describe him.
That's a remarkable story. I mean, can you imagine witnessing that? Um,
If you caught it on video, it would go viral.
yeah. um, within an exorcism, um, what happens? Like step by step, what happens?
Each case can be a little different depending on what's going on with the patient, where Father Amorth is. But step by step, after a person's approved and the bishop approves an exorcism, which in the Catholic Church is still required that a bishop approves the exorcism, which is much faster than the old days where you had to go to the Vatican to get a permission. So if that's all done, the first step will often start, of course, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the Roman Rite of Exorcism, a book, by the way, if you're curious about it, you can find a PDF for free through the Vatican. I think it's a fascinating book to read. Uh, but he would begin his practice by using holy water and blessings, asking for healing for the person. Depending on how that could go, if it escalates anymore, if they're becoming violent or anything like that, and maybe need someone to keep them calm and hold them back from punching Father, they'll go through that. And then the exorcism can last anywhere from 15 minutes to a couple of hours, and then it has to be done over several days, months, years, depending on how long it goes. But if he's using a simple rite, it's only going to be a few minutes, and that's a prayer in Latin almost always. In fact, I think Father Amorth notes that Latin happens to be a little bit more effective against demons, which
Right.
who knows why that is. Uh, he'll begin the prayer, and it's a prayer of healing and liberation that will go through, like I said, about 15 minutes. If the patient, as Father called them, needed more time, if they needed more intense prayers, and there was a need for things like using relics, he often would use certain relics from Padre Pio or other great saints to help people be liberated from the demons.
Mhm.
And that could go on for several hours, like I said, and many times he'll do it for months or weeks, see the person a couple times a week if need be. And yeah, that will include saints, holy water, just about anything you could think of, depending on how long it has to last.
Right. You mentioned earlier about people kind of receiving like secret knowledge or things they shouldn't know, and I was just interested to ask what would his view have been of the different types of well, clairvoyance, really.
He does answer that. In this book, it's a interview with, I want to say, Maria Viaggi, famous journalist in Italy. She asked point blank, is clairvoyance, is that always managed by the demons? Is that always a demonic entity? And he said very bluntly, they're not. They're not always going to be phenomena caused by demons. In fact, he wouldn't call them clairvoyants, but he had met people who had sensitivities, foreknowledge of spiritual worlds, and could usually observe that very quickly. Sometimes they would often be called just sensitives, as Father would call them in the English translation anyways. And these are people who can get a quick beat on a room, on a place, and what's going on. And he would sometimes consult them for exorcisms, especially if they had also a background in demonology.
Would he work with them?
Would he work with them? Occasionally. He didn't work with anybody who was a proclaimed psychic or anything like that. In fact, we don't know the names of these sensitives, as he called them, were, as far as I know. So they would work with him so far as to understand objects or homes or things like that. But otherwise, he tended to trust his own particular ways of discerning the spirits.
I read recently that cases of exorcism were on the up. Is this the case?
Well, it is in fact the case. So Father Amorth, as part of his work in the 1990s, I want to say 1991, so about 6 or 7 years after he became an exorcist, he created a foundation called the International Association of Exorcists, which to this day is still teaching people from various backgrounds. I think even Eastern Orthodox priests will attend these seminars to learn how to perform the rite of exorcism approved by the Catholic Church, the Roman Rite. And that means there are now more people than there were, because there was a while that the church was almost embarrassed about having an exorcist. Like they were almost embarrassed about it. And through the 50s and 70s, they seemed like, oh, we don't want to talk about that weird stuff. And I'm the opposite. I love this stuff. But so a lot of times, if someone was looking for an exorcism, they couldn't go to the Catholic Church because there wasn't an exorcist anywhere nearby. And that has changed dramatically. Most dioceses now still follow the rules to have at least one exorcist working within the diocese, usually anonymous. They protect his information. And I think what's going on is it might be less of a surge in demonic activity. It might just be like we're just seeing more of it because we have more exorcists out there helping people to look for it. But it is, I wouldn't be surprised either way. I think you don't have to be a mystic to understand that the world is very strange right now. And I can imagine it would cause you to want to go look for answers anywhere you can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. To that point, how can someone kind of like recognize the actions of a demon in their life, like the subtlety?
A very good way to figure that out is I mentioned obsession, and there is also, and that can happen especially if it's a new thing and it's for a pretty dark thing. If you're just obsessed with one particular case, an obsession with vampires, and not even just like the way I love vampire movies. It's beyond you're trying to really understand and dive into it, and even to a point you're going to look for it, but you're not sure where this is coming from, and it's a new one and you can't control it. That's one of the more subtle ways, is that obsession you're not controlling, you didn't consent to, or you don't remember consenting to in some cases, but you can't stop thinking about it.
Mhm.
Vexation is a particular type where you're seeing the classic haunted house elements. That's things moving, manifestations of frightening beings in the dead of night, things like that. And that can take the subtler forms like knocking and trying to keep you awake. You'll hear footsteps, and it's done to intimidate and frighten you to keep you terrified in your own home.
Mhm.
And then there's also ways that demons can infest something. An infestation. This can happen with objects, with homes, as weird as that is.
Mhm.
Father Amorth has one particular memory of a family who bought, oh gosh, I can't. It was some type of old antique furniture in Italy, something like 200 years old, and Father Amorth determined that when they were having strange supernatural occurrences that were terrifying to them, he found that this object was used in rituals and had a demonic entity attached to it.
Right.
And so that's another way people can come after you. The physical disturbances can be a big telltale, but often what the patient is going through, if it's unexplained voices, unexplained strength, knowledge is a good one. If the demons say, Father Morth noted, and I know other exorcists noted, that there's a belief that demons can look into you and tell you what your sins are, and that's a way to get them to chase you away.
Mhm.
But Father Morth never experienced that himself, though he does know of exorcists who had, and that's one way. If say the exorcist is performing the rite
Mm.
on a 21-year-old man you've never met before, you're just there helping Father out, and young man looks directly at you and says, "I know what you did in the summer. Da da da. You
Yeah.
were a horrible sinner." It's a way to intimidate you and get you to
Mhm.
get the hell out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's bloody effective.
I mean, it's one of the, people have often asked, because I've studied this, if I've attended an exorcism, and I have to tell them, no, it's not a thing I'm not sure if I want to do, but that's literally the one part that scares me, is if an entity just turns to me and says, "Hey, I know all about you, Michael."
Yeah.
I mean, that's even scarier than the ice or the strength.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's absolutely, yeah. Um, well, I mean, it's remarkable stuff. I mean, did he ever see anything manifest?
Did Father Morth ever see anything
Yeah.
manifest? Usually he would see the physical disturbances, the causes of them. I
Mm.
believe he did in fact find that he would see the shape of a demonic entity or something that was there to scare him.
Mhm.
And but otherwise he mostly didn't see any physical embodiment. Something that he could draw was typically more of the subtler form. Well, subtle, I don't know how subtle flying books off the shelf or anything is, but things
Mhm.
of that nature he experienced.
Right. Right. And markings on the bodies of the
Hmm.
patients.
Yes, that he talks about in some of his other interviews that are been previously published, but he does talk about people will get physical bruises or marks on their body. And we know through one of the more famous Catholics who study these things, the Warrens, according to them, that was often a manifestation they would encounter when they were investigating a haunted or demonic infested home, is that people would have just bruises out of nowhere, or they feel like a prick on their back, and they look
Mm.
and there's 4 perfect scratches down their back that
Mm.
can't be explained.
Man, that it's truly frightening stuff.
Mhm. It
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Um, I was just going to say that we're reaching the top of the hour, and I was
Yeah.
wondering if there's something that kind of about this book that I haven't kind of posed a question around that you think would be
Hmm.
interesting for the listeners to hear.
It's a great question. I feel like I covered a lot of room in a lot of things in this. So I'm not coming up with anything right away, I'm sorry to say.
That's all right. It's perfectly fine. Um, where's the best place for people to find you if they want to find out more about your work and your expertise?
They can go to sophiainstitute.com, and that's where Father Amorth will be. There will be links to a couple articles
Mhm.
that we've also published discussing Father Amorth. If you're on the phone and can't remember sophiainstitute.com, just use a bit.ly, and it's Fr Amorth, Framorth, and that will take you right there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. That was really,
Thank
really
you.
good. It's great to get another perspective um, for the audience. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's always a joy to share these things. I find this work fascinating. I'm glad to share it with readers who I think will enjoy it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Wow, there you have it. Thank you again, Michael. I really appreciate your time and your openness to coming on the show. As I said in the intro, you can find links to the book from publishers Sophia Institute Press in the show notes. There were some really resonating correlations for me, not just the unsurprising ones between Abrahamic faiths, but also the advice in not believing what spirits say. I've heard magicians say the exact same thing again and again, and it's good advice. You don't believe everything you're reading on the interwebs or on social media. Equally, why would you believe, something that comes through a Ouija board, saying they're your long lost aunt or Napoleon or whatever? A healthy dose of suspicion will always serve one well, I think, in these territories. And, I hesitate to use phrases like curiosity killed the cat, because curiosity is a wonderful thing, and it's driven human knowledge and understanding forward. Curiosity has led to many remarkable achievements. I think what's a hell of a lot more dangerous is rank stupidity and wide-eyed naivety. That killed a damn sight more cats than curiosity ever did. So please, dear listeners, by all means, be curious and explore. Just don't be dim when you're doing it. To finish, I honestly find it remarkable that anyone would choose the vocation of being an exorcist, from any faith, not just Catholicism. But I'm really glad that people do. I'm really glad that there are people who understand this territory, from exorcists to the shamans. We need those people. We need those people who understand liminal spaces and the things that live there. Right, I'm going to close on that thought. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Really appreciate it. Thank you again, and talk soon.